Everything fine?
Yeah, everything's fine.
Cool. Hello, this is Václav. Welcome to the Beyond Looping workshop that we're doing with the signals. And yeah, I've got a lot of things here on the table I want to talk about. I want to talk about the process of music making known as looping, how it started, how it developed, where it's now, and where is the future. Basically, looping might have started sometime in the 60s, where people started to experiment with tape machines, and you could have seen a lot of those early pioneers making tape loops, and also having live input for those tape loops. And basically, the moment people figured out how to connect a tape machine like a delay line, which means there's two ways how we can do it actually. So either you really make a physical tape loop, so the tape can run through the tape machine in circles, or you just have a tape that just goes in one direction, and you can feed some of the signal you pick from the read head back into the write head. We'll get a lot more into that a little later. Anyway, the loopers somehow became a thing a bit more in the 90s, later in the 90s, when Boss introduced some loopers, and some other companies came up with loopers that were mainly focused on the guitar market, on guitarists. I have one of those loopers here. It's the Boss Loop Station. It's one of the classics, and you've probably all seen the looper musicians at some point in your life, how they're making music, and I would like to reflect on that a little bit more. So the classic looping performance might look like you play a few chords on a guitar. You hit record, you play the first chord, second chord, third chord, fourth chord, and then you hit loop, and you're looping. So basically something like that. So I have the piano connected. So let's see. What's going on? There's a cable underneath. Delete, okay. That's it. So what I think loopers became really good at is that it's this immediacy of making music. So I just made this loop. What I can do now is to reactivate the recording and add another layer, maybe an octave higher. Yeah, and it keeps recording. With this setup on the table, I'm gonna talk a bit more about how it's connected, but just to give you an idea where you could go if you combine more different inputs for the looper. I can also add something from the kalimba here. Yeah, maybe I could synth something. But basically, I could keep going on, and it just keeps piling up. Well, and at some point, it's like really full. It's like, what to do now? Like, you don't have a lot of options really with this. This pedal is not like the first generation of loopers. It has undo. No, let me see. Undo is if I hold. Yeah. So if I do the undo, it can like remove like the last recording. So like all those layers I made as like one recording. So this is pretty much like the only thing I can do in terms of composition. So I can kind of like have a basic loop, make a lot of mess, do undo, maybe like jam on top of it without recording. This looper also has like a redo, so if I hold it again, it's gonna bring back like all those layers. And that's pretty much it. You can then like fade it out or something. But basically the way how you build a song or a song structure is like very linear, and like once you record something, it's always there. You can use the undo a little bit creatively if your looper has an undo, but that's kind of it. Obviously, you can have more than one looper, and if you check more of the products from Boss, they made the RC 202 and 505. These are like 2-channel and 5-channel loop station. They are not really designed to be like stomped at, like a stomp box. They're a bit more hands-on approach, and there's like a lot of musicians picked those up because they are pretty much still like one of the best things you can get for creative looping. So the general difference is that you have few loopers in parallel. They are all somehow like synchronized. So you can have 5 different channels and record each instrument into a different channel, and then you can mute those channels or like re-record them. And yeah, that offers a lot more possibilities. So Boss made like a lot of innovation on that front, and I think they still the RC505 is like one of the go-tos. When you were talking about looping, you can synchronize it with MIDI, I believe, as well. And yeah, it's like a pretty good looper. However, this workshop is called Beyond Looping, and what we kind of mean with that, we are discussing whether to call it Future of Looping or Beyond Looping. From my perspective, future is always a bit misleading because future is always now, and so yeah, you just somehow have to deal with it. But beyond looping is, what I mean by that is like how can you go beyond like what I've just described, the classic looping method when you just keep piling things up and maybe like mute some of it and so on. So yeah, I will link a few videos in the chat section later that you should definitely check out. And I would like to mention one artist who is also like a developer, and I think if you check what he is doing, that's quite remarkable. His name is Tim Exile, and he, I think, was really influenced by Jamie Liddell, who supposedly brought him to looping. And basically what Tim did, he built like a whole ecosystem based on a computer, and he wrote his own sort of like looping software with Reactor, which is sort of like a modular coding environment by Native Instruments, and that it can probably run like a VSTs or something. And he also developed some of these tools that you can actually buy, or maybe some of them are even free. So if you go and check Thyme Exile, he's one of those people who took the looping the furthest. So it would be best to just like play you example videos, but I probably can't do that since we're doing this on YouTube, and I can't really inject other people's videos into this stream. Anyway, if you would watch what Thyme Exile is doing, he has a lot of different like controllers on the table, and he uses some of them to play some simple motifs, and he uses other ones to effect them in real life. So he has one of those instruments, I believe it's called Finger, where basically by pressing a note on a keyboard, or maybe he's even using a computer keyboard for that, by pressing that, it applies a whole like effects chain momentarily on the sound that is happening. And in his looping configuration, that gets recorded and looped. So what he records just affects that like momentarily, and it turns into something completely different. And he's so good in playing his instrument that I believe he called the flow machine, that if you watch him do it, it's kind of hard to believe he's actually making the music live, because like he's like super fast. And I think that's kind of like the most appealing thing about looping, that it's like very immediate and very fast way to make music. And I think only few people have actually managed to like build very good ecosystems for them to navigate and you know and learn, because I think a lot about looping is that you kind of have to play on time, you know, with this audio looping thing. With this audio looping thing, you can't really quantize things time-wise. You have to play like really like on the beat, and you really have to really like know your instrument. So you have to be quite a good instrumentalist to be able to do looping in the classical sense. So if you watch Thyme Exile, he's just like so good at his instrument that it's really hard to believe that what you're hearing is like not a recording, because it sounds like super well produced electronic music. And what he does, because he's so good at it, he actually makes mistakes on purpose. And then he kind of finds a way how to get out of these. So I will link some videos of Thyme Exile, and I will also link a few more videos you should check out afterwards. Good. So yeah. So we had this nice loop. Okay. So I'll fade it out. So what I will be focusing here on mainly are not software instruments, not like programming environments that you can use to make loopers. I'll be focusing mostly on hardware products that you can buy, and how you can use them to do something beyond what I showed you with the Boss Looper. So one product I have here that's quite similar to the Boss is the Blooper by Bliss Audio. So this is a company based in Minnesota, I believe, and they do amazing guitar pedals, and they made this, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, and I think it really goes beyond of what you can just do with classic loopers. So let's see. So I just turned on recording. I'll stop it and delete. So record. Okay, so this is the classic. The Blooper, it has a MIDI input. You sort of need like an expansion box to actually connect the MIDI. So the big difference compared to the Boss Looper is that you can actually sync it, and that's kind of like the surface level. So let's see what we can do. So one of the cool things about this is the stability. So, or I would rather call it instability, because the more you increase it, you'll hear that it starts to like drift in pitch, and it's sort of like if it was a like really shitty tape loop or being played on something like really old. So it kind of keeps degrading the sound. Or you can just go back and have the clean signal. Okay, so let's make few more loops here. So I'm recording again. So I have created a few more layers here. I'll turn it down a little bit. I've created a few more layers. I don't really remember how many. And this looper has this layers control. So now it's on full, but if I go back, or if I go back like all the way, you will hear only the first loop that was recorded. And then you basically have the whole history of the looping process here on the knob. So here comes the kalimba. So in a way it's sort of like a time travel knob. I really like that they did that. I think there is six layers that you can be working with, and yeah. So this is one of the cool things about the Blooper. The next cool thing would be those buttons at the bottom, which are called modifiers A and B, and they are somehow linked to those two knobs, Mod A and Mod B. So these are the modifier knobs. So what they do, each of them has like 3 different flavors, and they're basically effects. So let's see what modifier 8 does. So you can somehow change the pitch of the, okay. Then there is different one when I flip the switch. Okay, that one is really subtle. It somehow goes through the recording buffer and like travels in there. number 3, number 3 is a bit more radical. So these were just like momentary effects, but if I activate the recording, these will get recorded. Then you hear, so the effect is like it's there. If I try the modifier B, what it does here. Yeah, I like that, so I'm gonna record a bit of that. So now you can tell, like, you can actually take the looped material like much further than what was possible with the Bastl Looper. And now guess what? Like all those like effects that have been recording, you can go back with the layers control, and you can go back in time and have the clean material again. So it's sort of like a multi-dimensional undo or time travel that you can work with. And I think this is what really makes the Blooper special. It also has some memory for loops, so you can actually store some loops in it, and a lot of different things I don't really want to go so much into. But what I think is interesting is the concept of destroying the loop, like applying effects that you actually record as part of the loop. Some of the loopers, like I've mentioned, the Boss RC505, these also have effects on them, but they apply only like momentarily, and they just like are there like when you press them, but you can't really like record them. You can't really destroy the loop. Let's see if we can do a bit more. So there's like a filter here, it's really nice. So I can pick different types of effects. Destroy the loop in many different ways. You can bring up the stability. Yeah, so then the Blooper, it has this knob called repeats, and it's active only when you are recording. So it will basically fade out what has been recorded while you're recording. So you can be sort of like adding new layers, and the older layers are like fading out. So let me show you how that would work. So you could hear the older material really got quieter, and as soon as you stop recording, it becomes inactive. So I won't be losing some part of the recorded audio anymore. I can record some of the modifier thing. Cool. Yeah, so yeah, that's the repeats. And again, with the layers knob, as soon as I move it, I can travel back in time all the way to the beginning, to this first loop that I've recorded. And then here are all the layers. Here's some layer that is without effects. There's this layer with the kalimba. And all the way to this. There is also like expression and CV input on the Blooper, which you can use to basically CV navigate. I think any of the parameters, also like the layers, so you can basically like play the history with a sequencer, or basically it's like very open-ended and very cool piece of gear. And I think they've innovated on the looping end like very well. Yeah. And it still has like a really cool foot switch interface that you can use, and yeah. So that's the Blooper. And then let's move on to some of the things that I've designed. I haven't really introduced myself yet. So my name is Václav. I'm the lead designer at Bastl Instruments, also one of the co-founders. So we've been building since 2013 as Bastl Instruments, a little bit longer than that as Standuino from 2011. So been doing this for almost 10 years now, or I've been building since for more than 10 years for sure by now. And some of these things I'm gonna be focusing now on are some of the products that somehow happened on the journey. I'm gonna try to switch battery in this camera. Let's see. We have the camera.
Yeah,
great. So this is the Thyme. Let me see if I can get a little bit better shot from above. So, yeah. So the Thyme is not really a looper, and it was not designed as a looper, but as a matter of fact, I end up using it as a looper. And so let's have a look at what it is and why it actually ends up being a really cool looper. It's like one of the core things in my live setup when I play live, and it's like always there. I know the machine like very well, and it always saves me. Like when I don't know what to do or if something breaks, I always have that, and that can help me. So I'm gonna try to draw here a little bit. So the Thyme you can imagine as sort of like a tape. So if this was like a tape machine, so some of the old ones, so you have these reels that and they would be spinning, and then as a result of that, the tape would be traveling in the tape machine like this. So in the beginning of the tape machine, you would have a write head, type W. So this is where the audio comes into the machine. So I can write something like magnetically here, like on the tape, and then that information can travel on the tape, and because it's a mechanical process, like metaphor of a mechanical process is actually digital, but we're looking at a tape metaphor here. Then sometime later, it would get picked up by a read head that would read the signal, and I will go and listen to that signal. So let's see if we can do that. So what I can do on the Thyme is that I can position the reed head. The reed head is stationary, so I can position the reed head, and I will do it with the coarse and fine setting on the Thyme. And the further to the right I place the head, the longer the delay will be from playing the signal and hearing it back. So the further I place it, the longer it's gonna take for the tape to travel from left to right in the tape machine. So now it's placed somewhere here. You can move it further. Takes longer. And all the way. Okay. So that's the delay. That's easy to understand. But what I think it's kind of nice that can actually kind of be like tweaking the head and sort of like picking different parts of the material and sort of do sort of like a micro time travel with that. So how does this become a looper? So it's kind of simple. So you take some of the signal from the reed head and it will go back into the right head. So there would be this knob on the way that would be called feedback. And there is another knob that is actually a filter. Yeah, cool. So filter, feedback. So let's bring some of the feedback. I'll start with a short delay time and bring up the feedback. So each time it makes the cycle, it takes a little bit of the output signal and writes it back to the right head. And because it's only some portion of it, it fades out as an echo. The more feedback I apply, the longer it takes for the signal to fade out. And if I put the feedback on full, it never fades out. And then it's just a matter of turning the tape echo into a looper, is taking the delay time and maxing it out, or like make it something like longer. So yeah, now it's already sort of like a looper. Now, what I think is like really cool about the Thyme is that you can control the tape speed. So now you can hear that the loop has a sort of like limited length. I don't know, what is it, 3-4 seconds. What I can do is I can turn down the tape speed, so the tape is gonna move slower through the machine. And as I do that, you will notice the pitch is going to drop also, because I'm just gonna play the material slower. Right? So the tape goes slower through the machine. So now, if I play something, yeah, I don't know how long is that, but it's basically much longer loop. So, and you can hear it's pretty out of tune. So I'm gonna turn down the feedback and let it die. So, no feedback, no loop. So, if I want to like work with the tape speed, it's kind of good to like use it in a way that I halve the tape speed, which would basically do that it's gonna play twice slower, therefore it's gonna play like 1 octave lower. So let's play something, feedback on full again. So here I can do it with function minus. So now I basically transposed it, so it plays in half the time. I can do it one more time again. So it now plays at quarter of the speed, which means 2 octaves slower. So now, because this is still like a very organic machine and very like simple principle that's allowing me the looping, what I can do is I can be moving the read head, and the read head currently is in a sync. So it's synchronized to a tempo. In this case, there is a tap tempo that is blinking here, and if it's synchronized, the read head will basically position itself to be, let's say, like half the time, or third of the time, or eighth of the time, or quarter. And you can hear like everything I've made. Like all the adjustments that have been made are still recorded on the tape. So, and on this looper, because it's not really a looper, it's a tape machine, there is no undo. It's like what you do, you have to deal with it. And so this was like one kind of simple trick how to start maybe something, or how to destroy something. And we're basically talking now about the technique that I call destructive looping. We've been doing a bit of that on the Blooper as well. So now with the Thyme, there's several other things that you can do, and you have it all like hands-on control. I've mentioned the filter. So the filter is in the feedback path. So it takes the signal from the read head, it filters it, and goes into the feedback. So if I apply low pass filter or high pass filter, it's gonna filter the signal on the tape, and yeah, it's gonna be there. It's gonna stay on the tape, which is like really nice. So what can happen next? I'll try to draw here. So on this tape machine, I have 3 more read heads that I can use and like mix here with the other signals. And these heads could be like positioned differently on the tape. If you're familiar with tape delays, you might be familiar with the term multitab delay. So basically these are the multitabs. So these are different 3 more read heads on the tape that could be positioned and amplified in different ways. Because there is 3 of them, like one knob could potentially position all of them. Basically the knob is called spacing, and it's sort of like a macro. And I can bring up the levels, which is also a macro for different type of level configurations of those heads. And basically they end up on the density. Yeah. So it might be a bit more obvious if I... Okay, let's go one octave higher, so it's a bit shorter loop. So what I can do here, that I can bring up a lot more density to what has been happening, and I can still like free up some of the space with the filter. Filter it with low pass, filter it with high pass. So I can be playing with the density, with the reading head. I can be playing with rhythm. And basically you can be like working with this material, and it's like very organic, and you can kind of really like learn to play this as an instrument. One of the things that I really like to do is to also use LFOs to modulate parameters, which is another way how you can apply rhythm here. So there is basically LFO on every single parameter on this machine, so I'll just use the filter because that's the easiest one to do, and I will synchronize it. So I just made like a very fast, choppy modulations on the filter. We'll add some density with the multitabs. Maybe modulate the filter again. And this can like go on, and yeah. So there is no undo. Like what we've been looking at with the other loopers, they have undo. They basically have this sort of like 20th century like computer era type of logic behind them. They're digital devices. Although this one being digital, it has like a very analog type of thinking behind it, which I think can be like very stimulating in the music making process. So it's basically the concept of like no undo being applied here. I promised to describe a little bit of the setup here. So you could hear I was using the keyboard and the kalimba, and maybe also the harmonica. No, it's this one. So all those like inputs, they get mixed here in the dude. So this is like a very simple 5-channel mixer. It's also one of the things that we made. Each channel has a mute switch and a gain control, so you can amplify signals. So that's why it's possible to use these sort of instruments that with piezo pickups, just like I don't know, DIY'd them myself. So yeah, so I have some inputs going into the dude, and then it kind of all goes through all the loopers, but some of them are like turned off. Actually, not really. I can still bring in do loops from the Blooper here. So it was just like the dry wet setting, and this one was just on dry. And I believe this one is also playing. So now I can hear the Blooper. I can hear now what I was making on the Thyme. And check it out. Here is this loop I was working on the Boss Looper. So, and now it's all of them. So this is also like a cool thing that you can do, is that you can just like run one looper into another looper, and basically they are like the Thyme is first, then is the loop, there is the Blooper. You can also experiment with different configurations. Maybe you can also make your own feedback loop. And basically, like, combining more than one looper is like one of the ways how you can like go beyond the standard looping. However, I have like two very creative loopers, one pretty basic looper. So I can be just fine working with like one of those advanced ones. But yeah, as you can tell, sometimes more is more. But yeah, from my experience, having like way too many loopers on the stage just confuses you at some point, and you don't know which one is playing. So I kind of try to limit myself to like two loopers. Yeah, so I was talking about that the Thyme was not really designed to be a looper, and I'm still kind of saying that it's not a looper, although you can like use it for looping. So then the question that might come to your mind is like, what is a looper and what constitutes a looper? And I think that's what I was doing with the Boss and the Blooper. It was that I basically like said like, now is the start and now is the end. So it's this sort of like gesture type of control that you say like, start now, stop now, record, don't record. And the Thyme has not a lot of that. You can't just say the start and stop point. However, you can use it as a looper. So the start and stop point, like really, it's important if you're like not really synchronized to a clock. But as soon as you actually synchronize your music to some sort of like a rhythm or some sort of clock source, you have a drum machine or something that generates clock, you kind of don't really care like where the start and stop is. You just keep the looper running in a synchronized speed, and yeah, basically it just keeps looping at the right speed. That's kind of it. So on the Thyme, because you can synchronize it either with analog clock or with MIDI clock, I never really felt like I was limited by that. However, from the interface perspective, it's not a looper, and it was not designed to be one. It's designed to be effects processor first and foremost. But yeah, I can highly recommend using it as a looper, as you can tell. What I think is really appealing, at least to me, about using this type of looping techniques is that to some degree they reflect how life works in a way. So in your normal life, if you fuck up, if you do something wrong, like you have to deal with it. So there is no undo in the real life. And I kind of like the idea that when you're making music, it's kind of the same thing, you know, because for me, like, making music doesn't get easier. Like, the more I make music, it does never get easier. The same is with my life. The older I get, it just never gets easier. It's like always surprising, always complicated, and always like really, really hard. So for me, like, somehow, you know, why should music have those like different types of why should it work any different than life? Like, why should there be an undo? Like, I don't know. Like, it might be helpful, yes, but in a way, when I think about it, it's a bit of a cheating, and it's maybe a little bit more adventurous, not only just for me as somebody who's playing those instruments, but also for the audience. It's a bit more adventurous when mistakes can happen, when there is no undo. Like, you know, like what you see is what you get. It's like there's no other way of, you know, going really back in time, or like deleting something, you know, making something and pretending it didn't happen, because it obviously did happen if we're talking about the context of live music. So, and I think this is, you know, with working with the tape metaphor, which is like very like, you know, 50s, 60s, 70s type of technology, it really it is analog in the mindset in a way. If I bring this up, it's still there. Like everything I've made so far with the Thyme, it's still there. Until I turn it off, it's still on the tape. Like everything I did, unless I turn the feedback all the way down, which I kind of hardly ever do, it's gonna be always there. So like the history of me using the machine is gonna be there. Like everything I do in the future is going to be informed or influenced by the past of using the machine, which is like the same thing as with life, you know, when you do something, when you learn something, you talk to somebody, there's new neurons that form in your brain, and yeah, something happens. Like everything you do in your life changes you. Like there's no way of saying this is not real. It's like it's actually happening. And of course you can like lose connections as well. Like here, I can also forget a little bit of what was happening, you know? I can blur it, you know? Some of the memories cannot be as present. Or you can just keep thinking about something. And you're overthinking, and all of a sudden there's too much of that. This is the sound of like me not being able to sleep really well tonight. So if I look tired, that's why, because this is what my brain was doing. It's just like firing neurons like whole night. It kind of happens to me when I'm supposed to give a talk or something. I'm just thinking like what I'm gonna say. So then the brain can't stop. So yeah. So this is my like little rant that might be motivating for you to try some of these techniques. Yeah, music and how it can work in a way that your life does. So I think we've been talking a lot about audio looping. And the thing with looping audio is I record sound, it's the sound, that's it. So what I would like to now talk about, which I think is even a little bit more future or beyond, and it's the Midi Looper that's been hiding here. Let's look at the Midi Looper. So I assume a lot of you have already heard about MIDI, about the standard. Oh, I forgot to tell you one thing. Like, write questions in the chat, in the YouTube. And there is Stefan who's actually collecting questions in the chat. And we'll do a Q&A after this. So if the stream is fine, you know, you can see me, hear me well. We'll be doing Q&A after this. So if you have questions, just write them down so you don't forget. Just keep piling up those questions, and Stefan is gonna help me to sort them out, and we're gonna have a bit of a Q&A in maybe like, 25 minutes or so. So MIDI Looper, looping MIDI. What is MIDI? MIDI is a control protocol. It doesn't contain information about the sound itself, but it contains musical information. So when I press a key on a keyboard, basically what happens in the MIDI, it says like you turned note A with velocity or dynamic information, and it's on a channel, so because MIDI has more channels, so it can define more than just one instrument. And then when I release the key, it says you released the key A, like you released it now. So MIDI is a control protocol. Gonna see, okay. So how does this work? So the MIDI Looper, now I have this keyboard and you've always heard the keyboard. So I kind of assume that you probably thought it's just the keyboard playing, but yeah, not really. If I change a setting on the MIDI Looper, it's gonna stop playing. Because what I did with this synth, I turned off local control, which means the keyboard got disconnected from the sound engine. And I can only play the sound engine now with a MIDI input. So basically I'm running output from the keyboard into the MIDI Looper. You can probably see a light blinking here. So that shows that it's reading the information from the keyboard. And then it takes this information and sends it out on an assigned MIDI channel. So, and I have 3 channels to choose from, and on channel A, that happens to be this E piano. If I switch to channel B, nice. I happen to be playing the O coast. So I'm basically controlling 2 different instruments with one keyboard, and it's thanks to the MIDI protocol. So I can be sending MIDI notes on channel, what is the channel? Channel 2, or I can be sending them on channel 1, which is this keyboard. I can be sending on a 3rd channel, but I don't have really any other synth connected here at the moment. So, and we'll be fine with just the 2 of those. Now, so again, the connection is MIDI out from the keyboard, goes into the MIDI input of the MIDI Looper, and MIDI out from the MIDI Looper goes back into the MIDI input on the keyboard, and from the second MIDI out, so I don't need to really split it on, there are 2 MIDI outs, the MIDI goes into the O coast. And there is a 3rd connection, and it's a clock connection, and it's actually a MIDI clock. It's this like mini jack MIDI, and I have the OPZ, and that one is sending MIDI clock into the MIDI clock input on the looper. So the MIDI Looper can actually synchronize to also analog clock or MIDI clock on the input, or it doesn't really need a clock. You can just use it in the same way as I was using the other loopers. So just, hit start and stop, and that's the loop. But because we've been like not synchronized to anything, let's just be synchronized for a while. Maybe I'll change the beat. This one. Okay. Okay. So I've got this beat. Ah, wait. I'll do this one. It's a little bit more easier. Yeah, that is the hi-hat, which makes it easier to follow. So, if you can see it on this side camera, should be a light blinking here that indicates that I'm receiving the clock from the OPZ, and yeah, I can start looping. Yeah, it's pretty much that easy. If I want to go and work with a different channel, like on the O coast, I just switch to the channel, hit record again. Probably you already understand like why this is a little bit more fun, because maybe not more fun necessarily, but a lot more flexible. So I can tweak all the parameters of the synth to make it just like sound completely different. So I'm not working with audio, I'm working with MIDI. And MIDI is just a control protocol. It just gives information about the MIDI notes. And yeah, and then like what I set on the synth, like that's how they're supposed to be playing. So yeah. I can stop it. So basically this is like undoubtedly the biggest advantage of looping in the control domain, which is something you potentially can do, and you could do it before, but like I wouldn't say it was like this easy. So there has been some Midi Looper before, but I think like the interface was kind of in the way of doing the creativity. And you can also be asking like, hey, I can do this with my sequencer, and like, yeah, sure, you can. But the but is like, you can't really do this like start and stop. So let's play this again. I just erased the loop. So I just start playing, and I don't know. Now I honestly don't know how long the loop is gonna get. I'm just gonna start playing and see where it takes me. Maybe I'm just gonna play one chord, maybe I'm just gonna play the whole chord progression with 2 variations. I don't know yet. Wrong instrument. So the fact I didn't have to like decide on the length of the loop, I think is like very important. And I don't think you can really do it with any sequencer. With sequencers, you just like define the length of the loop, and then you just have to work with that. Second thing you probably cannot do with sequencers is that you have just like one gesture to clear and start from scratch. And here I have that. obviously. So there is this clear button. With one tap, I clear the selected voice. With two taps, I clear everything. And you can go to the next instrument. So I think that kind of serves as a demonstration, like what is the difference between like sequencer or MIDI sequencer or whatever sequencer you work with and a looper. And to my surprise, there are not really like MIDI loopers out there. I mean, there is one, there's two actually. And yeah, but I kind of wanted to do one on my own, so, and it's kind of surprising for how long it was in development to just make it right for me. So let me show you what else is the great advantage of working with MIDI Looper. So I played this, yeah, sort of arpeggio, but I wasn't like super like tight in my playing. You can just hit quantize, and it's gonna be quantized. I can change even the quantization to 8 notes, which is actually what I was playing. Or I can go to quarter notes. Or triplets, sextuplets. So you can't do that with audio. Or I can just turn off the quantizer again. So the next thing you obviously cannot do is with audio is to work with the velocity. So I can hit the velocity button and lower the velocity, right? And I'm doing it now with on the looper itself. I'm gonna show you a little later how you can do it differently. So I can basically like change dynamic information on the fly, or you can have the original. What I can also do is I can transpose. Go an octave lower, 2 octaves lower, or 2 octaves higher. Quantize it again. Yeah, so I think by now you probably understand what are the main advantages of MIDI looping. Okay, next one. So let's say I want this to play twice faster. I will go to stretch and go to stretch 2, which is gonna like shrink it. I can also make it play 3 times faster. It's gonna actually create some sort of like strange polyrhythm, or 4 times. Okay, it's pretty crazy. Turn on the quantizer. We'll just go back to the original. Yeah, so I can also change the length of the loop, which is something you probably can do on some of the loopers. So I can go to like 6 beats. So it starts to like variate with the beat, so it's gonna be a different time signature. So you can also change the time signature. So, so this is the MIDI Looper in a nutshell. I just want to mention a little bit more of the connectivity here. So there is a metronome output, so I can be monitoring the metronome. So basically the OPZ or the sequencer I have here, it's always outputting the MIDI clock even though the sequencer is not playing. So basically I could be like using the metronome just to hear the tempo, and I can start with looping, let's say, my piano here, and then bring in the beat. So I wouldn't have to be, I wouldn't have to rely on starting with a beat to actually hear the tempo. I can use the metronome output for that. The MIDI Looper has also, I'm gonna show you on the side camera here, it has some more inputs on the side. So one of them is the metronome, but then there are inputs. So they can be used as inputs for foot switches. So I can have a foot switch to control the record button, the clear button, and selection of the voices. So what I've been doing here, I can be doing it with my feet, which is pretty nice because like I don't have to be using keyboard at all. I can have drum pads, and if I use drum pads, I don't have a spare hand to operate the looper. But maybe I can like find a split second to use my foot to, I don't know, change a voice or do something else. So, but those inputs here on the side, they can be also used as CV inputs, and there are 3 different ones. So retrigger, velocity, and transpose. So transpose can take analog, or they all can take analog voltages and use them to manipulate the MIDI information, which I think is like a really interesting way how to interconnect analog gear, which especially with like modular synths can produce a lot of like really interesting control signals, control voltages, CVs, and I can use that with the MIDI environment. So let me show you what I mean. So I'm gonna take this, it's sort of like a LFO output, and I'm gonna activate those 2. Activate them here. So okay. So I'm going into the retrigger input. Okay, that's nice. So it basically just like re-triggers the notes each time the LFO makes a cycle. The next thing I'm gonna do here is that I'm gonna take just a simple voltage, which is controlled with this knob. It's like super simple. And I'm gonna go into the velocity input. And I'm gonna lock the velocity to like, to 1, that's fine. So basically now with this knob, let me try to show that like this. Yeah. So with this knob, I'm basically doing the velocity, and with this knob, I'm doing the re-triggering. So that's something that might have been like quite difficult to do with the MIDI gear. So let's see what we can do if we play the beat and record something. I think you can get the idea by now. So Yeah, so this in my head is beyond looping, and I think you can actually go further than that. So, but I think looping in the control domain in general is like very underexplored territory when it comes to musical instrument design, and you can already find some like really great like control loopers in the Eurorack scene. If you're into modular synths, you can have like different types of like knob recorders. Actually, the Midi Looper also records like nocturnes, so you can record and play back CCs or pitch bends, aftertouch, like all that. It also does that, which is like really neat. But you can also like do all these things with the modular synths, and I think the Midi Looper could be sort of like a bridge in between those two worlds. Okay, we're almost kind of coming to what we decided as the time plan. So if you actually are still on the stream and you're listening and asking questions, I should be getting your questions really soon from Stefan. So let me see if there are questions in the chat.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to?
Oh yeah. So Nathan is asking what, what inspired us to design the Thyme and the tape speed to allow changing loop pitch to fifths. Okay, so what inspired the design of the Thyme? I will post in the chat a video that we filmed maybe like 8 years ago, maybe 9, in Cologne in Germany. So there is this. There was this Karl-Heinz Stockhausen studio in Cologne, and one of the former assistants of Stockhausen actually collected all the gear, and in like a basement of a fitness center he connected everything. I don't know if it's still there. I was there like 8 years ago maybe, and we went to see the place, and this Mr. Miller, I think, or Herman. Well, we went to see this guy who was working with this gear like all his life, and basically he showed us a lot of these like tape tricks and tape techniques, and we were like really inspired by that. So that's why we designed the Thyme as an effects processor. So basically we wanted to have like the immediacy and the analog thinking behind the tape machines, but augmented and easily accessible to like, normal human beings. So if you ever happen to own a tape machine or tape echo, like the real deal, you probably know it needs a lot of care because it's mechanical and it's old. So you need to take care a lot of the mechanics. But with like a digital reincarnation of such thing, you don't really need to do that. So it's it's there. It's for you. There's something you wouldn't be able to do with a mechanical delay, and that is to have modulation source on every single parameter. Like you probably wouldn't be able to control the tape speed with an envelope follower signal of your input. However, with the Thyme you can do all that. There is also the filter. You can like tune. Like there is a lot of things. Like there's so many things about the Thyme. Like we could spend like 2 hours just on the Thyme. There is also like a sequencer you can use to control everything. But I've shown you just like the basic idea of what I think makes it a real musical instrument, because this is like something that like your brain can still like understand, because it's based on a physical metaphor, and it's also the drawing on the Thyme, the design of it is actually like showing you the metaphor that it's built, that it's based around. So it's kind of like you can still like understand the concept and learn it as an instrument and find lots of different ins and outs of the instrument. So yeah, and the looping part of it is it just happened to be there. Like we saw tape machines being used as loopers, but it was never the main intention. The main intention was really to do like a really interesting effect, like echo, one that where you can like modulate the time to like very finest grains. So you could actually use it for color plus strong synthesis, or that you can also have the dynamic effects present in a very in a very cohesive sort of like signal flow. So like the signal flow is like always the same, and you can go from any preset, from like a phaser preset into a looper preset, like in just like one gesture, which I think is pretty amazing. And it just like keeps all the information like on the tape, sort of. So that's the first part of the question, and the second part of the question is if the tape speed could be quantized to fifths, which I believe you are familiar with some of the Chase Bliss audio products, as I was showing the Blooper, because they have designed the mood which actually has that, so you can like change the speed of the core also to fifths, which I think is amazing. I haven't really thought about it a lot, and now that I've played with a lot of the Chase Bliss stuff, I would really like to have that. I would like to see that as well, and yeah. So maybe sometime in the future we'll see that. Are there any more questions? So since we're not really getting questions from you, we can like keep it running for a little while, unless there are more questions. Yeah, so what to say as like the ending thing. So when I play my live set, I play as Toyota Vangelis. You might check out what I do, but basically the core of my setup is the OPZ, which is like a sequencer, and I have like pre-programmed patterns in there. It also is my clock source. I've built like a custom controller for it, so it's easier for me to change patterns and stuff. And then I have a MIDI Looper, which I use for controlling like a FM synth and an auto tune. I'm getting another synth in the game. And then I have the Thyme with some of these inputs like the kalimba, the harmonica, and so on. So basically like this is like the core of my setup. And I actually have been like going through a couple different setups, and either they were like way too leaning into the loopers or way too heavy leaning into sequencers. So, and I kind of didn't like neither of those, because like if you're just looping, you're limited to like what you practice, like what ideas you can get in real time. And with me, I'm not that kind of person that can like instantly come up with like new ideas. I can do it for like 15 minutes, like that's fine, but like not 45, you know, it just gets boring. So for me, the balance of having like pre-programmed loops and then having the loopers really works, because I can program like really difficult rhythms and arpeggios, some stuff that's maybe like even a little bit generative, and I can combine it with the live input. So yeah, I think like designing live set is about balance, and as I said, I use the Thyme as a audio looper or destructive looper, and Midi Looper as my sort of main melodic looper, and then the sequencer. Seems to be one more question.
This one, yeah, sorry.
Right. So how I collected the harmonica to the looper? Can you explain the connections? So I have a couple different sources going into all the loopers, and they all mix in the dude. So this is just like a very simple audio mixer. And this harmonica I have here, it's not like a really thing you can buy. And I understand why, because, you know, it's like not perfect at all. And I built this pickup. So I kind of stuck a piezo in here and then just soldered a jack connection. And the dude is like good enough to amplify the signal so I can use it for looping. The kind of downside of doing it like this is that it kind of only picks up like one half of the notes really well, and the other half, because like it's on the top side, and the other half is a lot more silent. But you can't really do it there because the reeds vibrate there. So it's kind of hard to do like a really good pickup on a harmonica. But I use it. I use it a lot for a lot of different like tapping sounds, stuff like this. Yeah. So yeah, that's the harmonica. And so then the dude mixes a couple different signals. I kind of built also the pickup for the kalimba that I have here, but you can buy kalimbas with pickups. That's like a lot easier task to do than mic up a harmonica. And so yeah, so I have like 4 signals. When I play live set, I have 5 different ones because it's a 5-channel mixer, so I use all of them. Signals that mix, and then they go into the looper, and I can mute some of them. So when I'm when I have the harmonica, I disconnect it. So when I'm moving it, it doesn't get like all these handling noises. So there is the mute button, so that comes handy. Okay. Yeah. So I hope that comes as a conclusion of how this is connected. Okay, there's one more question. You tried making a template within a DAW that deals with the same concept that you applied in the Thyme. I don't really work a lot with DAWs. I just use them as like multi-track recordings, so I don't really design software, but I've seen a bunch of different loopers made with Max MSP. I can't really like give you a lot of guidance in there. So like this talk was really specifically built around hardware that you can actually buy. You know, it's not something you need to build from scratch, because like a lot of these Max loopers, like everybody builds his own, you know, in a way that fits their needs. But I'm sure there are some that you can just like download and open in live and like use them as they are. So I haven't really used those like Thyme concepts in VST. Maybe somebody knows. Just write it in the comments. I don't use a lot of software myself. But as I mentioned, Tim Exile earlier, he's been working with native instruments, and some of his sort of destructive effects processors are available as plugins. So check out Native Instruments, Tim Exile. You might be able to find something that you like. Okay. So Nathan is suggesting I make this harmonica in stereo with 2 piezos. Like, yeah, That could be nice. I actually have a couple of those harmonicas in different tunings. Yeah, cool. Well, thank you for all the questions. If there are like no more questions, I would like to also thank Stefan for helping me pick up those questions, and the team behind the Signals Festival for making this happen. I still need to check how good the quality of the stream was, because I don't know how it's like in your city or in your country. Right now in Prague, internet everywhere is like really, really bad, because like everybody's online. And yeah, the data networks here are not like very well built. So, but we are recording this, and I'll be probably re-uploading it to YouTube at some point, so you can rewatch it in better quality. So if there are no more questions, it's just gonna be like a quick invite. I'm sitting here at Noise Kitchen in Prague, which is the store of Bastl Instruments. And you can come here, and there's a bunch of modular synths. There is also like a lot of different brands that we like. And there's great people working in the store. I have my lab in the back. Yeah, so if you are in town, if you maybe play here or do something, just stop by here. It's a good meeting spot for the scene. Yeah, so I hope we meet in the future, maybe in real life, because this was originally meant to be in a real life session, as far as I understand, with the festival and also with having Bastl involved. So maybe next time we'll have a hands-on together and we might jam a bit. So let's see where the world gets us next. It's not definitely short on surprises. So my name is Václav Vangelis from Bastl Instruments, speaking from Noise Kitchen. Thank you so much for joining, and yeah, have a good day and enjoy the festival.